Welcome, everybody. I'm Ashish Kaushal, the CEO of Higher Talent and Consciously Unbiased, co-founder. Welcome to our 6th edition of the Future of Contingent Workforce. We've made some big predictions in the past and moved from talking about the impact of COVID to the golden age of contingent to the vendor recession last year. We're going to see how accurate we were and then give our predictions for this year. Last January, we discussed the concept of a rolling recession, unemployment largely staying the same because the market forces, which include the Fed increasing the interest rates, congressional spending, which was contrary to what the Fed was trying to do, a reduction of immigration and the trends on onshoring and nearshoring, as well as retirements outpacing new talent workforce entrants. All this makes it difficult to reduce inflation, and also it's all just basic supply and demand issues. Fast forward 6 months into 2023, we sat with 270,000 workers laid off. Unemployment remained roughly the same, which is what we talked about in the beginning of the year. Artificial intelligence has taken the world by storm. We got to figure out what's hype and what's not. It's given us a taste of what's possible. Also, the potential of reducing wage inflation through AI and automation could be a deflationary concept that we might deal with over the next 2 years. We thought automation is going to replace all the low wages, but now we're sitting here and it's replacing the intelligent class, or however you want to call it, the cognitive class. Analysts say it could affect 25% of all jobs. Inflation seems to be getting under control. However, the rapid rate of increasing it too aggressively could cause some counter issues for us. I think one of the areas that I keep talking about is raising the rates this fast is going to cause a massive commercial real estate crisis, and that's still on the table from my perspective. New York City, I think the 60 Minutes last week had a session that's 98 million square feet of unoccupied space, which is going to definitely affect us. And then finally, we keep hearing about an inverted yield curve on a simplistic level. That means that the banks usually lend short-term debt and borrow long-term debt at a lower rate. The spread is their business model. With the yield curve inverted, the model doesn't make much sense and can cause a correction in economic activity. So now let's talk about, we're in a faux session. Did the recession already happen? Are we at the edge of a recession? Today, we'll be discussing how generative AI and possible economic downturns and other disruptions are impacting this segment of the workforce. We have an amazing panel of guests. They all been here before, and I think you all know them, but I'm just going to announce them again. Karen Salfer is Global Head of Consumer Products, Life Sciences, and Industrials at Pontoon Solutions. Pam Sands, VP of Diversity Office at Kelly OCG. Bruce Morton, Global Head of Strategy, Leads Global Solutions. Brian Hoffmeyer, standing in for Doug Levy from Beeline. Brian Salkowski, COO, Guiding Global. Jason Ezrati, CEO of Brightfield. Ryan Baker, President of Monument, and then Jennifer Torney, Global Vice President at TAPFIN. Welcome, everybody. Good to see y'all, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year.
So we're definitely going to start with the first one, which is last summer we made some more predictions for the end of 2023 and 2024. What's one thing we missed and what's one thing we got right? And who wants to start with that? I volunteer Brian.
Which Brian?
you were at the last one.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking back, as always, there's some things we nailed and there's some things we missed. I think that we did a good job on the last call calling out how the uncertainty in the larger market would weigh upon the staffing industry. And we really saw that. There was a steady deceleration in H1 of last year. And although there was some leveling, the industry on a whole was down compared to prior year and prior periods. So uncertainty can be good for business. In this circumstance, it weighed against it. Now that we've been in a period of leveling, I'll go ahead and project that we'll see some bounce back late H1, H2 of this year. In terms of something I think I missed, certainly we missed, as you'd mentioned in your opening, we talked a lot in previous sessions about the Great Resignation and this skyrocketing quit rate. I think we missed how strong the counter reaction would be. And there's been numerous articles talking about the new headache is people won't leave. You can't get them out the door. There's not enough not enough cycling of fresh talent, fresh ideas to business, and it also puts constraints on salaries and related on the expense line because there's some natural attrition anticipated. So it's interesting to see just how strong the blowback has been and how long we'll sit in this state of timidity as it relates to making job changes.
Oh, absolutely, that's a good point. Jen, what do you think? What were some of your predictions that you got right or wrong?
I think Brian really eloquently stated, I think, what we all experienced. And it seems like we were just together not that long ago, but it's been a little bit of time. And I think last year definitely served up the change we experienced, or rather estimated. And I do think, I think I've been more surprised about a couple of things that we had no idea were going to come, which is the affirmative action ruling. I know we'll probably talk about that at some point today, and the impact of that on the conversations that we're making such big progress with DE&I. Certainly didn't expect the year to be such a roller coaster. But I will say I also didn't expect December to pick up, and we're seeing that. So I think I'm feeling very cautiously, slightly optimistic about 24. Certainly it's always nice to start fresh, but I think once we were in 23, I don't think we really saw a path forward. Nobody really knows, were we in a recession or not? But I am feeling like we are definitely coming back. People are hiring. Our numbers are going back up with headcount. So, and I see heads nodding. I'm sure we're not the only, right? So I'm hoping maybe that was the end. The only other thing that kind of surprised me, maybe it shouldn't have, is that return to work was going to be such a hot topic again, like real return to work where there's mandated return. I think for a couple of years, we got really comfortable with, we can do this. People are going to want to work from home. And there's so many organizations that are absolutely mandating it. I don't know that I saw that coming to the extent that we're seeing it now.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Yeah, and I'd kind of amplify what both Brian and Jen said. Across our customer base, we're seeing this ever so slight, almost imperceptible increase in number of new requisitions, sort of same store spend, if you will. And in polling our clients in terms of what to expect in 2024, we're hearing exactly that we're going to see this slight increase in usage of contingent labor across a wide range of verticals.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know if I can jump in here. I am the new kid on the block, so I wasn't in the last.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't make any bad predictions, but I think we have like a unique. It's a really neat group here because we have a lot of spend under management when you look across this group, and I think the story to me, and this kind of answers the macro question. I don't know if we're going to get there as well, but in 21 and 22, we had the most epic run of all time when it came to just contingent spend. And it was a mirage, quite honestly. There was a lot of money in the system. It had to work itself through. And then last year, we kind of saw that kind of come to a head and everybody took a breather. Mm-hmm. And we definitely, I said it on one of our prep calls, I felt like we were in an industry recession. The country wasn't in a recession, but our industry was in a recession. Mm-hmm. And I think we have stabilized, as we look across our portfolio and our numbers, and it's not as big as some on this call, but pretty decent. We're seeing stabilization and we're actually seeing an uptick. And from our clients, I think it is going to be more of a normal year. I think we're back to 2024 is hopefully normal. It's been a while since we've had one of those. Last year wasn't.
Don't jinx it.
I know. See, I'm the bad guy. But I really hope we see a normalization to some extent and kind of get back into that nice cadence of 5 to 10% growth all the time in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, but you said it, Ryan. I think that okay, we all anticipated 23 to be difficult, and I would argue that we probably were surprised by the loss of jobs in certain industries like IT. That was much more than we anticipated, at least from our side. But at the same time, look at the unemployment rates. They remained at all-time lows, right? So you're right. Probably our industry felt more of turmoil than the rest of the economy. And then I would also say what surprised us is that certain industries stayed extremely stable and actually continued along this strong growth that we saw after COVID hit. So I'm thinking consumer products, etc. We still had really strong years. So it was a mixed bag in 23. I'm with Jen. I hope that we have stabilized and hopefully look at a decent 24. We will talk about it probably in a little bit further down in this panel. I'm somewhat more cautious for 24.
And I think one of the things we got right in our predictions was the acceleration of digital and of AI, right? We predicted that well. I think that, and that's going to be part of our conversation today, I know as well. But also, I think what surprised me, which others have also mentioned, is when we were talking before, was going to be the conflict around inclusion and diversity in the workplace. And something we could have looked at is knowing we were going into an election year this year, that could have been anticipated a little bit, knowing that we have that in the US, as well as some of the movement that's happening within the European Union and what's happening with some regulation there around agency work. I think that's something that as we look at 24, stay a little closer to that, right? And see if we can get any prediction around that.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember on the last session, Bruce, you mentioned that there's also this be the struggle when you think that you're in a recession. A lot of clients tend to sort of work on rate card analysis. And in this case, the recession hasn't really been a recession for the talent. So you can't really put the same pricing pressures and the traditional models you'd use to do cost savings in place anymore.
Yeah, I think it's been really challenging for organizations because the drivers keep changing. And I think through last year, it was about, there's a massive talent shortage. It's all about finding that scarce talent. How can we have other routes to market for those people? Let's increase our use of freelancers, as an example. And then it became, we've got to save a ton of money. But you can't go get those reductions because the talent is still scarce. So I think, something you mentioned, Pam, I think we did unfortunately see the focus on DE&I diminish because all of a sudden you're chasing something else. And I think you're right. We perhaps we could have and should have predicted the politicization of diversity and inclusion. Living in this crazy world that if somebody has a head of DE&I, they should be cancelled. I mean, that's where we're at, right? So I think we sort of missed the boat a bit on that one. I think on a brighter note, we talked last summer about organizations taking this slower time to actually get some more strategic thinking done and perhaps starting to think more about the work, not just the talent. And I think the explosion of what is now called skills-based organization the last quarter, you can't open a blog or a webinar without seeing that term. I think organizations are on a different journey now, on a different path. And I think a lot of that is we don't want to go through what we went through the last few years, hiring thousands of people, letting them go. That's just definition of madness. So I think companies are genuinely thinking different of how they can get work done now. And coming back to your point, Ryan, I think that we had some debate about summer, but where we're at right now is we're taking 2019 as the last normal year, and that becomes a benchmark going forwards. And it took us some time to do that. Like, which year should we choose? What's going to benefit us? But I think that's where we've got to now is let's write the last few years off and use 2019.
It's a lot of denial, right? We didn't want to go back to those years, but we have to really use that as a baseline. Jason, did you find the same thing? Like, I know that last year probably was the year of strategy for organizations because they couldn't use old playbooks. Did you find that was happening? And have you seen it? One of the predictions everyone made was that the trend of contingent labor moving under the HR umbrella rather than staying in procurement. And have you seen that trend going on?
Yeah, on the first point, and it's something that I think we nailed was, where uncertainty was how things were shifting, that we were being less strategic. For us, it impacted our roadmap. We had more strategic products and features that we were building. And as we saw uncertainty, at the start of the year, I think we made a good call that people are going to be more focused on bottom line, near-term economics and savings. And so we made some shifts to focus there. I think what surprised me, and I think we were predicting differently, hence the phrase golden age of contingent, the fact that so much has been shifting away from contingent hiring from the demand for it. So the demand came down for contingent much more than I anticipated. Anyway, I won't blame everyone here. And And I think, to the point of like how it's impacting the macro and how it impacts everyone's business here, we're seeing, across our market intel, some of that cause for optimism, but it's not necessarily because rec demand is so strong on an individual placement. And by the way, it also shows up very differently by industry and by location. But the thing that I'm finding interesting is some of the volatility in the underlying components of the economics, the length of the assignments coming back to longer, where initially they contracted down. And so the overall economics of the money in the system, I think, is showing better promise than necessarily rec demand.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a separate point. To your second part of the question, are we seeing more HR ownership? I think maybe that part is picking back up, where it felt like procurement was really going to be the main player, where we were saying it's 50-50 for so long, and procurement picked up steam.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, because of skills-based and because of some of the overlap with talent acquisition, we're seeing CHRO come back to the table. And I think that's healthy, because it means that we're still undecided on the question of is talent the same as HR?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm going to go back to, you guys made me think of another question around this. So we said that we've had a vendor recession on contingent labor specifically, right? And the unemployment rate hasn't changed, which means that people are working somewhere at this point. So was it that they switched in industries, or did they go more full-time direct hire, or did they go into this other area, which I know I always tease you guys about this. There's contingent labor, which is very well defined, and then I call it SOW, some other work. Everything else goes in that bucket. So is it that clients still did the spending, but they just put it in that SOW bucket, or is it that they went to a different industry or direct hire or something like that? Because it clearly would have affected the unemployment rate if they weren't going anywhere.
I mean, there's usually. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
No, I think we do this every time, Jen. I
insist. You do, and it's always you. I'm so sorry. I'll say real quick. There's always an inverse reaction. When clients decide to put a clamp on hiring, it goes to SOW. That's just so. I mean, we've seen that occur, so it's pretty predictable. I mean, I don't know that it's been massive, but we've definitely seen that. Okay, Your turn, Brian.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, that you see whenever there's scrutiny in one area, other areas tend to expand. If we just look at it, to your point, the unemployment rate has not shifted, right? It's been stuck within a couple basis points up and down. So those individuals who have been caught up in reductions have gotten absorbed elsewhere. In terms of our industry recession, one thing that's really interesting to note is that the temporary penetration rate, I don't like the term of that analytic, but it's a Bureau of Labor Statistic data, and that number has gone down, right? So the amount of contingents in enterprises, so they're getting hired, but they're getting hired under a different banner, different moniker. They're full-time employees. They're on a statement of work. They're doing gig work. So that the traditional contingent worker, the temporary worker, that is down. Now, for when we talk about optimism or Ryan, your return to normalcy, a snap back to previous levels would be a great gain for our businesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You said gig work. I wanted to double click on that too. I'm so glad that you brought that up, because we think in terms of like corporate America that we staff for, right? But there are a lot of people that for whatever reason left corporate America and exited, and out of necessity or what have you, are operating in a very subpar for them gig type arrangement to bring money in. And it's very accessible. You can just say, you know what, I'm going to go drive for Shipt or Shopped. I'm going to go, do an Uber thing for a little while until I figure out my next job. And so I think there's employment that's happening that is below what people really want. And so it's this feeling of I'm not truly employed, but technically they are. And so I think that's also impacting our ability to bring people in, because the resources aren't necessarily all there.
I think we've all seen a shift from, these large tech companies, for example, with massive layoffs. There's been so many that where those folks have gotten rehired quickly, but in smaller organizations that we don't have a lot of visibility to, that still need those, to the point Bruce made about skills, like it's not a high tech organization, but they still want data science or high end app developers to manage their business.
Yeah.
I'm with you, Jen, on that. I was going to add is that we also look at this from what we're not seeing are those that are the long-term unemployed, thinking about that 2019 number, right? And some may not be underemployed and have chosen this way of work because they want more control over their own destiny. And there could be some frustration with what's happened in the traditional forms of work. So they've taken a more non-traditional approach for themselves and are making it work. And so I think that voice of why people are interacting with work the way they are versus being seen as an employee is one we need to understand a little bit more because they're driving the conversation. Since we're not seeing that movement in the unemployment rate, we need to look at outside that unemployment rate, what talent and the skills that are needed sit outside of that, and why are they not formally engaging? I think it's one of the questions we ask ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. So speaking of that, so you see from a macro perspective that we have two wars now instead of one from last year, right? We have inflation possibly happening again if the routing of oil has to go around Africa, right? Because that's going to create an increase in supply chain issues. And so we have those sort of headwinds coming through. And then we also have this underlying thing about office space that unless the interest rates fall dramatically, I think we're going to have a tidal wave of potential bankruptcies there too. But I keep hearing that the second half of the year is going to be amazing. So, so do you guys all still feel that it's going to be the second half, or do you feel like it's going to get delayed, given these tailwinds that are happening?
Ryan already jinxed it. It's going to be fine.
Yeah.
This month back.
I'm going to be a bit more of a Donnie Downer or Debbie Downer here.
I'm just being realistic. So Brian's hiring.
I just think going in an election year in North America, obviously we're not just talking about North America here, but it has such an impact. I'm just very cautious about the whole year. I don't think it's going to be. I think it will be above 2023, but less than a handful of percentage points is my call. It's going to stay very, very flat. I just think there's so much going on for people to be able to get that next level of investment, and the cost of money is going up, and I'm just a bit more cautious about it, I guess.
I think the word caution has been used a few times. That's the right word, right? Like, and I'll clarify a little bit of what I was saying. I do think this year will be good. I think it will be more normal. It will hopefully be more reflective of like a 2019, as Bruce mentioned. But think about the comp we're coming off of. That's kind of where I'm, that's my comparison, as I'm saying, hey, 2023 was rough. It was tougher for our industry. So I think 2024 will be better than that. And I do think there will be some headwinds by the end of this year, especially we see interest rates come down. I mean, I don't think it's 6 times like you've seen in some areas, some circles. I'm not an economist, but 3, we're going to need rate cuts at some point. And I do think that will give businesses more confidence going into the later half of the year and into next year.
Yeah.
Also, I'll try to balance it out. You got Bruce there, the downer. Ryan's here in the middle. I'll try to be the optimist for all of us, and just say, when we enter a period of uncertainty on the front end, it's usually the contingent workforce that feels the brunt of it first, and we see that in multiple business cycles. On the back end, we're the first to accelerate. Mm-hmm. So there's been a lot of when we look across our customer portfolio, and in particular in specific industries, there's been a lot of capital projects that have been delayed and deferred that can't be delayed and deferred forever. And we're coming to that point in the business cycle. So in our prep for this, I had said it's easy to predict the future as long as you don't say when, not one. But is it H2? Is it Q4 versus Q3? There could be some movement there, but I think there are reasonable and good reasons to expect some snapback in our business as we move into the next phase of the cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Brian, I think one of the things you guys all pointed out. So I did talk about all these headwinds that are coming through, but I also think on the other side, we tend to have a bulimic economic policy in corporate America, in our government, where we overcorrect on one side and then overcorrect the other way, and corporate America sort of follows that. So I feel like we did overcorrect last year, and so even with these headwinds, we're probably going to get some sort of nominal increase regardless, because we went too hard, too fast.
Yeah, the one thing I'm cautious about is I think we had buffer in 23, right? Like, so we had high interest rates, we had high inflation since come back, unemployment was stable. Probably in the good years we created some buffer. I'm a little bit nervous that going into 24 with interest rates probably still staying high, given, you know, inflation's rates are not yet where they should be and unemployment remain good, that these buffers are gone. And so I am somewhat cautious going into 24. If I talk to clients around the globe, I am hearing a lot of talk about savings. Where can we get savings? How can we be more efficient? And somehow the talk has shifted from speed to hire to quality of hire. So in other words, we don't want the attrition, right? Like we don't want to spend money on replacing people either. So it does make me cautious. I think you're right. I think Brian or Bruce said it. Obviously, contingent labor picks up first. So that's probably where I see the green shoot in the second half or maybe the fourth quarter. But going into this first half, I think caution is the right word. Just also judging from the talks I'm having with clients.
I think you made a really good point there, Karen. You know, one of the things that we see a lot is the balance of cost and quality and speed, right? Like that's become a much more important part of the conversation, and giving folks tools that they can make those decisions. I think that's going to be ever more important because of the volatility we're talking about.
I think it's about good hygiene, and so where I think the last few years where people were all about pace and there was such scarcity that it led to some bad hygiene in the hiring practices, and I think now we're seeing it to get better. Refocusing on quality is one point of evidence. The main one that I'm feeling, I love that you guys are referring to SOW as that rug that things get swept under the other problems. 2/3 of our business growth in the last 2 quarters have been SOW focused savings routines. So those that have been hiding under SOWs, the light is now shining, and it's been an incredible tear in getting things to be right sized economically.
So
I'm just glad to finally hear Jason embrace the importance of good hygiene.
I'll jump in there. I'll jump in there with a cautious optimistic as well. And I think that it's important for us to look at where we're having the conversation, right? What part of the globe, what's happening within those particular regions as we look at that. But I also think when you look at the combined experience that we have, the unique advantage we have as an industry is that we work with so many different industries. So that combined knowledge with talking with talent and talking with our clients about how can we find those possibilities in the margins of where work is actually getting done and how it's getting done, I think could be really a year of possibility.
So that, Pam, you bring up a good point. So I'm going to talk, so this is the next part of what I want to talk about is basically trends for 2024, things that you wish you did in 2023 that you now are going to apply looking back because you have the history around it, right? And so we talked about cost savings, and we can't get that out of the rates because the unemployment rate is still too low, right? So, and you can't take any more money out of the MSP fee or the VMS fee because that's pretty much optimized at this point, unless you guys don't think that. So that brings me to Bruce. Like one of the things that you talked about is offshore 2.0, moving from outsourcing to BTO. So you want to talk to you about that trend?
Yeah. If you think, I mean, the best descriptor I've got for this is if you think about those that are old enough on the call for Y2K, when we, the world was going to end and we sent all this work to India, so put an extra couple of zeros on it any time, anything with a time on it or date on it, rather put 2 more zeros on it to stop Y2K happening. That was a getting rid of menial tasks, back office stuff. And that's how people used to think about technology. It was a back office function, kept your lights on, we had some spreadsheets for you. Now, come forward one generation, and every company on the planet, they tell me at least, they're a technology company. They happen to be in ... So that means now the technology is a front office competitive differentiator. It's not something behind the scenes. So organizations that used to be happy offshoring, completely outsourcing all of their IT, are now taking a completely different view of, no, we need to control that. But we need to find somewhere in the world where the talent is, and it doesn't cost as much as it costs in North America. That's why India are having this phenomenal boom in GCCs right now. $45 billion industry that will be $60 billion in the next 2 years, 30% growth. And this is millions and millions of people. And, and it's not just going, in this instance, to India because it's labor arbitrage. It's where the talent is. Yeah. Here in the US, we produce 95,000 computer scientists a year out of college. They produce just under 1 million. This isn't just about India. We're already starting to see early days of Eastern European coming on board in GCCs, nearshoring into LATAM, and it's and it isn't just. It's not necessarily a choice. It's almost like that's the only choice you've got now. Our unemployment in IT in the US is sub 2%, so therefore it's you can call it zero.
Absolutely.
So that's why I think while we might be economically in a recession, I think we're going to see a lot of movement more globally in 2024. So it doesn't mean the staffing industry isn't going to grow, but perhaps not as much here as it will elsewhere.
When Bruce, your point underscores the importance of continuing to focus on capturing all of these different ways people are using contingent labor, because I think we
absolutely
hopefully all agree that too few companies have done just that, and yet they're still asking these questions about how and where should work be done. And if you don't know the work that's being done, you can't answer those questions.
Right. Yeah.
I think, Hoff, it's interesting, and same thing with what Jason just said, or Bruce, sorry. I've been saying this for a long time to various clients, but I think where the MSP comes into play and where we can really lead our clients is we talked about CHROs, we talked about global, we haven't talked about direct sourcing or AI that much yet. Really, we are a talent acquisition strategy company. That's what we do. We help our companies and our clients, customers with their talent acquisition strategy. And there's a whole lot of ways you can get that contingent labor. We're talking about SOW like it doesn't exist in our programs. It does. A lot of us have SOW in our programs. It should be in our programs. A global outsourcing strategy should be in our programs. A payrolling strategy should be in our programs. A direct sourcing strategy should be in our programs. That is what a mature program looks like. And we're talking about all of those things in different segments of this call, but we need to continue to lead our clients down this path. And I think the global side of this, the outsourcing side of it, the 2.0, if you will, and it's very real because, again, to your point, the talent isn't here. They're working already. So where do you go? You have to go to LATAM. You have to go to India. And that's a good thing. I love that, especially in this day of remote work. Why not? So I think we're going to all get better because of it.
Absolutely. It's funny. I was listening to a podcast, I think Saturday, and for us to maintain our workforce at equilibrium we have today, we have to basically allow 2 million new immigrants in a year. Otherwise, we're depleting our population of workable talent. And so I don't think we're willing to do that. So we do have to look at these offshore methods, and it's not a bad thing. There's also this pressure of regulatory trends, right? You see what's happening in Illinois. So what are some of the trends we need to be mindful of for 2024?
Well, from a regulatory perspective, you hit on the the Illinois temporary worker parity law. There was the New Jersey temporary worker bill of rights, and if you look at them, they're very similar to some of the European laws for AWR, if you will. I think you're going to see that continue to proliferate in a patchwork type fashion. It just puts more contingent labor is not going away. It just puts more onus on the enterprises to ensure that they have a compliance mechanism. They're monitoring this. That as rules are being proposed, they're weighing in on the commentary. Oh,
I think we lost him for a second.
But I would expect we'll. I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. We lost you for a second.
Oh, yeah, I think my connection's getting a little fuzzy here. And in particular, one to watch is around independent contractors as we continue to look at guidelines that put really tight controls around who can qualify as an independent contractor and the penalties associated with enterprises that improperly engage. And then the last one is really around continued focus on exempt and non-exempt. So all of these are front and center. The long-term trend is towards more restrictive, more guardrails for the worker, and more hurdles for the enterprise.
And I'll jump in there as well. Well said there, Brian. I think that there are known regulations that we're aware of that pose a risk. But I think what we've got to be very aware of are the unknown regulations that are coming that could propose significant risk. And I think one of the ways we do that is really to make sure that we're tapped into those federations around the globe that are keeping an eye on those policy changes and looking at how we can collaboratively work on that together. You mentioned the temporary worker agreement. I don't know if, I'm sure all of those on this call are aware of that, but it was a significant risk in Germany last year, that if it's not a far stretch to see how these things that start in Europe make their way across the pond. And that's what we're seeing here in the US. So I think the biggest thing we can do is to make sure that we're plugged into the right areas and the right sources to make sure that we're gaining access to that and leveraging those shared activities for policy reform that can happen in our space. I think I'll end with what I started with. What we don't know has the greatest risk for all of us.
100%. Jason, last session we had Teresa Carroll on, and she had talked about reducing friction between the worker and the work. Do you feel like we've achieved any progress around that front in 2023, and where do you see that happening in 2024?
I think the evidence against is we hear a lot of conflict, like the work from home, working remote, coming back to office, presented as conflict. So I don't know if the trust improved, that people are necessarily seeing a better sense of synergy, the place where they work as the best place to do their work necessarily. I think where it's perhaps improving is this shift toward quality of worker, where enterprises are again realizing that that's a place to invest and that it's important to care about and create these senses of continuity. So I would say I'm not sure where it falls on the balance, but I would say no. We have not yet improved there. Economic uncertainty doesn't lead to worker employer trust, in my opinion.
Yeah, I noticed you have 2 LinkedIn profiles. Is that because you have 2 jobs?
Is that me?
I'm just joking. You talked about trust.
Is the other one better looking?
Yeah. Bruce, last time we spoke, you talked about the black market of direct sourcing, and Karen mentioned that it's an add-on, but not a replacement to talent sourcing strategies. With the penetration in the low teens in specific programs, what are your perspectives today and the trends for 2024?
Yeah, we did see actually more of a growth the back half of last year than we actually expected. Organizations were latching onto, I think, because of the focus on cost savings. So I think that's going to continue. I still don't think it's going to be a major play, but I think it should be, as somebody mentioned earlier, it should be in our arsenal as an MSP to get that in the program and make sure that we're giving our clients all of the options and the optimal routes to the talent. So I think it'll continue as it is. I think companies hopefully will get smarter at understanding when you should use that strategy and when you shouldn't. I don't think the blanket approach necessarily works, but I think the spotlight will remain on it because everybody is obsessed with savings right now.
We've all overcomplicated direct sourcing. So many parties involved. I mean, you have like 6 different entities involved in a direct sourcing arrangement, which is just herding all of those cats is incredibly difficult. And so I think we have to collectively look for ways to create simplicity to make adoption go up.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of growth in people launching the programs, but that was also a learning that, again, maybe it was just me, but I think it took us a while to realize how slow the ramp is. And I always say it's like opening up your own staffing branch. It's like you're a brand new staffing branch and it's one hire at a time. And then you get up to critical mass and you can maintain that. But it takes a long time to start paying the dividends. And I think that's where, as providers too, we have to educate clients to say it's not going to be this silver bullet. Like there's other ways to drive whatever results they're trying to get to. But I think it really has become a critical aspect of looking at, and we've been talking about like the mismatch of talent, high, low unemployment rates, high job openings. I think it's really the answer at some point, if we can figure it out, to redeployment. And that's where I think we need to be focused on is, redeployment and what kind of upskilling do we need to kind of create inside of that dichotomy? Because otherwise, It's just another supply channel.
Mhm.
But I do think it has that connective tissue to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, Jen, you bring up a good point. It's a supply channel. I was going to ask Ryan about this. Like, what's the right percentage of how much direct sourcing should be in your program? Because if, like, let's say you get to 90%, and that direct sourcing provider starts failing because the right resource just left, you've created a single point of failure, right? So you don't want to be at a place where it's your only vendor.
I don't know if you said Brian or Ryan.
Brian.
I have strong opinions about direct sourcing, and I have no qualms with it. We have direct sourcing in our programs. I just have always been kind of the skeptic when it comes to direct sourcing. I think people underestimate the relationships that these businesses have with the firms they've worked with for so long. They do not want to let that go. It's hard enough as an MSP to go in and say, let me run. I'm not even saying take your suppliers away. I'm saying you can still work with them. We're just going to have a more formal process. Now you're saying in that we're going to work with this one company. It's, to me, it's a prime supplier on steroids. And I think it does have its place. I think it works in specific situations really, really well.
And it
the right situation.
Yeah. Sorry to cut you off. I was to say, like, it works in specific markets extremely well, right? Like, so sorry if I cut over a little bit. So say in the UK, obviously this is a strategy that works extremely well. But I continue to believe that it's an additional channel. And I mean, look, we've been at this for a long time. We should view it as an additional channel in certain markets, and absolutely we should do it. But it's not the silver bullet, as someone has said here. So I don't think it's changed much, but it works super well for certain clients and in certain markets. And as such, we should probably continue to evolve it.
Yeah, I don't want to talk this to death, but I think as an industry, we have a tendency to create buzz and promote the next great thing. Customers are always coming to us to say, what's around the corner? So much of this noise is of our own making. And when we really boil it down, Karen and Jen, I think you nailed it. It's complementary. It's a complementary channel. And there are certain markets and areas where it works well. And the biggest opportunity is around effective redeployment, where at best, depending on where you look, redeployment rates are 5%. So there's a huge amount of upside there. This is not the industry transformer. It is something we created excitement about that actually overpromised relative to what the actual channel can deliver.
Absolutely. And Huff, I'm going to add to that. So why do we need 5 different MSP VMS systems and talent acquisition systems to run a direct sourcing?
You only need one MSP.
Well, yeah, that's
like crazy to me.
That's exactly it. Because what I specifically mean is you can, there's the client, the MSP, sometimes a separate curator, a payroller, the VMS, and direct sourcing software. Like all of those relationships just take time to figure out. And so if we can look for ways to combine those into one thing, where we're seeing more and more MSPs, for example, do their own curation work. That's a good thing from my perspective, because it takes out one of those elements of complexity. And I think we're just, what I agree with what everyone's saying is that this is a channel, and we're going to see these merging of channels, right? Like, a few years ago, we were, Bruce and I probably talked a lot about online staffing, and like we're seeing online staffing look more like traditional staffing and vice versa. Like we're going to continue to see this coming together because organizations are using technology to create automation that didn't exist before.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
I'm old school, so I think a lot of this is sort of just refolding the paper into a different type of airplane. At the end of the day, we're still using talent. We're paying them by the hour. We're the ways that they're found. So it's the in between stuff that's really dramatically changed. So it affects the people on this call, I think, in ways that are deeper than the talent themselves or the buyer. And so, someone said it's basically a prime on steroids. And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. So if I'm old enough to have seen where a master supplier owns it all, and it's up to them to take that risk of how they deliver, this is just a technological advancement on some of those same themes, in my opinion, then taken up by the hype cycle, to Brian's point.
Absolutely. And then let's switch into Gen AI. So I can tell you personally from our organization, well, one, I think the stock price it really helped. There's a lot of stock and marketing hype last year, right? And so now I think this year might be the first year we'll start seeing some sort of economic value from it. From our perspective internally, I've managed to use that pretty extensively to sort of automate different things, help us write better job descriptions, take away some of the lower level tasks that recruiters did. And then there's also, from a scheduling standpoint, it's great, right? Like I even personally, there's this thing called OHAI.ai, and it will take my calendar and I can send it, it's text-based. I can send a text to it and say, hey, can we schedule this? And it'll go and put that schedule on my calendar and also coordinate with other calendars within my family. And so I see that happening with clients and staffing companies, because part of the effort of getting interviews scheduled is probably one of the longest, like most inefficient processes we have. So in your perspective, how are you looking to use AI in your organizations this year to create more efficiency or a competitive advantage? And how do you think clients should be looking at it internally from their perspective? How should they be using it? Because I know there's always this barrier of change that happens.
Well, speaking of things that are driving the economy, in an era where savings is the buzzword, the one area that we're hearing new budgets being created and customers saying they have to spend that money is around AI. So I think that's industry impacting. There's budget there. But in my opinion, the advice I give customers and others that are thinking about AI is to replace it with the word automation. And then all of the rest of it becomes true. Perhaps one of the differences with AI versus other forms of yesterdecade automation is with AI, I don't see it necessarily replacing as many jobs as it's getting work done that humans weren't necessarily turned on to before. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that your example, Ash, is necessarily replacing the secretaries of old. I think those admin assistants and those roles are already going through a transition with other forms of automation. Sure. And then other than that, it's getting more done that otherwise was being left on the table and left undone.
Mm. Yeah, it's an enhancement more so than.
And when it comes to anything with AI that involves humans and employment, I think it's absolutely critical that you think about, the providers you're using, are they meeting certain criteria, right? So things we're looking at are that making sure that humans are in the loop, that AI is supplementing but not replacing human decision making, that of course it's ethical and compliant. I mean, we've all heard story after story where it's not, and so that it's compliant with laws, and those laws are ever changing and they're going to continue to increase. I mean, talking about regulatory stuff we're going to see, I'm sure that's coming. And then it's built on good data that's trustable and explainable. Like there's so much stuff out there that's not, including like ChatGPT. I mean, look at the problems it has. I mean, the data it's based on is from 2022 and no newer. Like it's missing a lot.
I'll just quickly say, as an AI play, I spend more time answering the questions that Brian was just getting to, as opposed to just an enticement. Tell us why this is safe. Tell us why this is real. That's the 80% of my conversations with buyers after the initial enticement. Sorry, Karen.
I just love what you were saying, though, about just replace it with automation, because I think we have, again, going back to sort of the hype cycle Brian was talking about, it's like we start talking about AI as a thing. There's so many different use cases and ways that you can leverage automation in your business. And so when someone says, how are you using AI? I mean, we could put together a 60-slide pack with the different use cases of how we can, utilize that to speed up our processes and be more efficient. I think the challenge is going to be actually not us getting our jobs replaced, but our jobs will get more challenging if we don't lean in to learning how to leverage it, because we won't be effective. And so I think that's what we've really been saying is it's more an upskilling situation than it is a replacement per se. And I think it's going to be impacting more of the corporate jobs rather than anything else, and not the lower level. I think it's going to be the white collar and all of us on this phone call. So it's interesting to me to see how it plays out.
Yeah, if we play that out, because I get asked a lot, does this mean we're going to employ less people? And the answer is maybe, maybe not. But they will be. What I can say with greater certainty is they'll be employed in different ways, right? So if we look at a recruitment process, there's a lot of transactional steps there. There's a lot of repeating. You think about an onboarding cycle. Ash, you mentioned the interview scheduling, the skills matching from job drafting, job descriptions, etc., there's a lot of transactional, repeatable, and mundane tasks that are ripe, to use Jason's term, for automation and to leverage tools that can help with that. But does that eliminate the work, or does it redirect the work towards higher end and higher value activity? I put my money on the latter.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, really love your term automation. I think it's interesting. We haven't just started working with AI since, I don't know, the summer of 23 when this became such a hype, right? Like we've been utilizing AI in our hiring processes for a long time. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in different areas to become faster, better, leaner, also around D&I, right? Taking the human bias out of selection, for instance, that's a great opportunity. And we've already utilizing it, not just since yesterday. It's interesting how it just became, I think the velocity of speed of AI utilization across the different industries, that's changed or is changing. Adoption is another key area, right? How quickly can organizations adopt and change? And I also totally agree with you, Jen, on what we get challenged with a lot from our clients is, what skills do we need in the future? How is AI impacting our businesses, our industries? What skills do I have to think about to hire or upskill 5 years from today? Where do I build my next factory so I have the talent I need that utilizes more automation, I'm going to call it, more artificial intelligence? So we're in a really interesting time, and I think we don't know the answers. We don't have crystal balls, but I see a lot of opportunity for us as an industry to really play a role and to consult our clients in that area.
Yeah, really fascinating conversation and great input. And I love where you were going with that, Karen, because my thought was not just, how are we leveraging it as organizations, but how are we looking at this from a talent perspective, and how are we helping upskill and reskill the talent needed to fill the positions that are bringing AI to companies, right? So this is absolutely an opportunity for us to lean into that, and also leveraging that for how work is getting done and not just who is doing the work. And so what I've said on I've had this come up in a couple of conversations, is that we are using it on a daily basis. How are we upskilling ourselves? How are we reskilling ourselves to be really knowledgeable in that conversation? But I think there's a significant play here for how we are helping the talent get ready for the jobs of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And I love, go ahead, Jason. You're on mute.
As a long-standing student of technology and the evolution of technology, there's plenty of examples where the state of the art and what's technically feasible far outpaces what we, the people, actually consume. How many people here have Velcro shoes? There's so many examples of like Brian maybe, but other than that, there's so many examples of that. How many people remember the stories when 3D printing hit a peak, and then everyone realized it's not as practical to 3D print it all and then have fully autonomous factories. So I think there's going to be a delta in what is possible and what we dream up at night and what scares some folks at night versus what's actually uptaken and made practical into the world of work.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, Jason, is to be very practical. The favorite AI in our company right now, everybody's going crazy about in a good way, is the Copilot. So at the end of every Teams, boom, you get an instant half a dozen bullet points summarizing that meeting. And that isn't replacing, that would have taken me an hour to write. The fact you didn't do it because it was going to take you an hour. Mm-hmm. So now we're getting those. We never used to get them, right? Because nobody got around to writing them up. And you go, oh yeah, I can action on that. And it just makes everybody's life so much easier. So I think there are practical things like that can help us today. But I also agree with everything you said. I think that in our industry, AI in the future will be helping us advise our clients on how and where to get work done, not just as a selection or writing a job spec. I think it's far bigger than that.
Bruce, have you ever used Otter.ai?
Who, sorry?
Otter, OTTER. Yeah. I love that one because it kind of really helps you figure out who says what and take notes and capture that.
Here's my favorite right now. If you haven't looked at it, AI Pin, which is a new device being built by Humane, a couple of ex-Apple people. Their whole strategy is that their whole view is that all of us will get away from screens in the future. None of us will have screens. You don't need a phone. You don't need a laptop. Little thing that clips in your pocket. But anyway, check it out. It's,
I will. That sounds cool. I kind of think one of the things we're missing the mark on AI is that, so I might be good at sales, for example, but you put me in an operations role, right? And we could use AI to say, you know what, Ashish is, by capturing the data and say, you know, Ashish is in the wrong role, let's put him in the right role and make him more efficient. And I think those things, it's not replacing you, it's actually putting you in a better place to be successful. And I think that's something that we're not really looking at, but it'd be an interesting thing to see happen in 2024.
Functionally, that wouldn't be impossible. I think it's more that the job mapping in the first place that everybody's like, I don't really know, because that's where I think the data just isn't there to be able to do the work. I mean, you can easily plug and play, I think.
Absolutely. And so that brings us into DEI. We saw last year, we missed this one, and I missed it as well. The one thing I think that we have been seeing for years is that the population growth is becoming more diverse in the US, right? So we can't get away from this. And it seems like corporate America is embracing DEI and the regulators are going the other direction. And it seems that corporate America, to me, is ignoring what the regulators are doing because they know that ultimately they're in the business of making money and they have to be able to attract talent. So no matter what the policies are, they're going to push through this at some point. I think where we missed the mark in the last several years is we made it a favor and we didn't make it a strategic initiative, right? And so when the economy went bad, we got rid of all our favors because we can't use them right now. And so I think the shift from my perspective is that DEI is going to be more of a strategic thing in the sense that you're going to hire the best person for this best job, not because they look a certain way, and going back to skills-based hiring. Maybe AI helps that, but what do you guys see in terms of trends for 2024, given that we have sort of conflicting things going on with diversity and how it's being applied and the policies around and the regulation and the risk?
I mean, really high level here, but it's very much at the top of mind for all of our clients. It still gets talked about. It's in every governance meeting, every EBR, you name it. It's a topic, and I think they care to make it work and make it part of their strategy. I think what I would love to see more traction around, and I think a lot of people have said this on this call in the past, and I know you have, Ashish, it's like, how do we impact the worker? That's to me the most important part of this, like the individual worker. And I think what we're talking about with like skills-based strategy can help there a lot. So, let's get the right person in the right seat, regardless of their background. And if we think like that, that's important. And I do think businesses are better, obviously, with unique backgrounds, and you get a lot more thought leadership that way. So, I mean, quite honestly, we don't have a choice, right? Like to your point earlier, the population is becoming more diverse. So if you're going to hire workers, you're going to have to hire a diverse group of people.
Absolutely.
Right? Do you even have a choice, really? I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. It's absolutely at the forefront of the CHROs, the boardrooms, despite maybe the policy changes or politics that are different. The companies, the corporates keep this front and center. And I really hope skill-based hiring is here to stay. And that should not have any bias, right? Like we should pick the best people for the job. We should obviously also ensure we help those that are less privileged and upskill and rescale. That's on us, our companies, to drive that. But I totally echo that, Ryan. Like that topic has not gone away. That is totally top of mind for companies.
So I'll be a little bit provocative here, and just so in the broadest sense, I agree. Inclusive hiring is not going away, and it's a business necessity. It's a mandatory. But Bruce used the term earlier at the beginning of the session, politicization. That is absolutely very real. Ashley talked about the regulatory impacts as well. So my provocative statement is inclusive hiring is here to stay, but you'll see those efforts probably become more internally focused and less externally in terms of how it's broadcast and put into motion. And we've already seen some of that. And where we've seen pullback, I don't believe, nor have I heard in any of my experience, that it's pushback against inclusive hiring and engagement. In most circumstances, it's a budget reality, and where you've seen DEI initiatives pulled back it's related to cost management rather than a change in philosophical or strategic direction.
And I'll add to that. I think that it may be a budget consideration, but I think we need to move it to the top for being a business imperative. And one of those things we need to do is moving past intention to impact and making sure that those intentions that are starting many times in the boardroom or at the C-suite are making their way fully deployed throughout the organization, and we're holding individuals accountable for those actions.
Absolutely. Jen, you were going to say?
I was just going to say, I mean, I think with anything, progress is a continuum. I don't think we lost the progress that we've made. The conversations have changed. I did see some deceleration of the hot topic. I mean, it was a very, very hot topic in 24 until it wasn't as hot. And again, I think with the economic, situation, I think a lot of organizations were looking at a lot of things as priority. But I do see that the conversation is still alive and well. I see that it's more about ESG and more about the holistic approach to it. I hope that as we continue down the path, it becomes less about quantity and dollars spent and all of this sort of keeping score, and rather really looking at the entire ecosystem and how we care for one another in our workforces, in our homes, in our schools and communities, and that it becomes more qualitative instead of quantitative.
Absolutely.
Well said.
Well said.
Love it.
Yep. I mean, something that I've been saying the last year, right, is you can't fix the E and the D until you get the I right. And so you got to get your I policies right first.
Ooh, another good one.
Yeah.
Well said.
Well done, sir.
Bruce, any other thoughts?
No, I'm good. I think everybody covered it.
Jason?
I think in this world, we're talking here about lowering barriers to fairness. I think when others hear it as less of those, more of those, to Jen's point, who put it more eloquently, I think that's where the tension begins. And I think we're getting to a better form of articulation of what it means to be fair.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're out of time. I really enjoyed this. It's always intellectually challenging and also inspirational. And I love that we all play well together. So thank you for that. If anyone has any last thoughts, let us know. Otherwise, we will do this again in 6 months.
Thanks for being the host.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ash.
Great seeing you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Good to see you, Doug.
With the most.